Well, welcome to your podcast. Yes, here's your host, Rob Elliott. And today I can say you I am truly privileged. I have a very, very special guest from Maine, near Portland in the USA. She is a business prosperity coach. She is an orthodontist. She's a business owner. But as most people would say, she is a mum. And to me, that is the most important thing. Welcome to the show, Tarryn MacCarthy. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. This is an honor to be on your show. I'm so grateful to be here.
It's absolutely amazing to have you here. Now, Maine, for our international guests, now we have people listening to our podcasts all over the world. Where is Maine for people who may not know?
We're the northeasternmost state in the US, right near Canada.
Right near Canada.
Yes, we see the first sunrise in the morning, and it's gorgeous this morning. Absolutely.
As I would expect to be. So did you always grow up there?
No, I'm actually originally from South Africa.
Wow.
And so born and raised in my first decade and a bit in South Africa, and then moved to America and moved to the Boston area. And now I'm here in Maine.
So you came over with your parents?
Yes, I did.
Now that would have been an adventure for a 10-year-old.
Let me tell you, it was definitely a part of my life that shaped my life. And I believe my success trajectory as well. Definitely a big, big part of my life and a big part of my story.
So what encouraged your parents to move from one side of the world to the other?
Oh, Rob, this is a deep conversation from the beginning. They, we moved in the 80s, right before the fall of apartheid.
Yep.
And my father was a business owner in South Africa and kind of saw the writing on the wall of what was impending in terms of the economy there. And he had some connections in the US. And, I'm so grateful to my parents because they gave up so much to give us an opportunity of a more free and a country that was more open to greater opportunities for us. It was one of the greatest sacrifices my parents made, and I'm so grateful.
That's fantastic. So you went to school in Boston?
I did.
And I ask all of my students, I call them students this because they're still students when we're talking about this. Did you sit in the front, the middle, or the back?
The very front seat every single time,
so
always.
You're a nerd.
Through and through, Rob. Absolutely.
Awesome.
It's absolutely part of who I am. Yes, the front seat and to this day, that's funny that you ask that, Rob. To this day, any lecture or course I go to, it's the very front seat.
So I saw when I was doing my, as we call it, my stalking of my guests, you're actually an orthodontist by trade.
Yes, I am.
How did you end up from the front seat at school to being an orthodontist?
So when I was in school, I fell in love with art and science. I have such a deep love for both of those things. And I had this entrepreneurial spirit bubbling up inside of me. And also a long lineage of healthcare and giving back to the community and my family. So for me, all of those things added up into dentistry. And orthodontics just called me because it's where everybody is always happy. When you go to the orthodontist, you go because you want to, not because you're in pain, not because it's your last resort, but you go because you want to make something beautiful out of your smile. And what drew me to orthodontics in particular is that people really feel great about themselves when they can express themselves verbally. And if they're conscious of their smiles, then they're more resistant to being able to say what they really mean or say how they feel. And we treat patients at such a tender age in these teenage years where they're really forming who they are.
100%.
And it's fascinating, Rob, to watch a 14-year-old who's very self-conscious of her smile suddenly grow to love and appreciate the way her teeth look so that she can be more brave to speak up in that classroom, even if she's sitting in the back row. And the other thing that I love about orthodontics is 99% of it is my patient doing the work, which teaches them at that age that they can do something that at that point seems impossible. When you start with a snaggly smile and you don't understand how teeth move, and then you watch how little steps, daily steps, these small commitments on a
Yeah.
daily basis
Yeah.
spread out over a long term are
Yeah.
compounding and transform something like a smile. It's a great lesson for life and for business. Just that constantly showing up and doing the right thing. And then over time, looking back and seeing this amazing transformation.
So you would see some of your clients or customers come in as kids and nearly leave as young adults.
Absolutely. And transforming in front of me in so
Yeah.
many ways. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, that's awesome. So you've been in that business a long time. And I also heard we were talking off air before, you're a mum.
Yes, I am. Yes.
How many children do you have?
I have 3 and they are transforming in front of my eyes at the moment. 2 of my boys are just starting high school. And oh my gosh, I swear every time they walk down the stairs, they look different. Do you know that age, Rob?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely a privilege to watch them in front, taking this journey. It's really cool.
So did you start the practice yourself or did you go in with someone else and then more from there, as we say?
So actually, this is my second practice.
Yep.
And my first one I purchased from an older orthodontist.
Yeah.
And I had that practice for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And what happened was, this is actually a big part of my story, is that I was working so hard to make success of that business, Rob, and it was failing and crumbling all around me.
And you thought by working harder, you'd fix it.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, I've seen it myself. Yeah.
I just worked harder and harder and harder. And, you brought up my children. At that time, I had my first 2, and both of my boys, I was back to work before my due date.
Ouch.
So which sounds interesting, because of the stress and cortisol that I was flushing my body with, just kind of fighting to make that business work. I gave birth months too early. Both of them were very, very young and were in the NICU for a while. And because I felt the pressure of maintaining that business and the salary of my team, the commitment I'd made to my patients, I was back to work before their due date. And I was running myself absolutely ragged and not taking care of myself, not taking care of my marriage.
Yes.
And definitely my business was showing it, and everything was kind of falling apart there.
So what was the straw that broke the camel's back?
What it was, Rob, was I looked in the mirror one morning. I remember this day so clearly, and I didn't even recognize the woman looking back at me.
Yeah.
And I got scared. And I started to run. I just thought, I can't do this. I started telling myself all these stories that I'm not cut out for this.
Yes.
I can't do this. Everyone else knows the secret to business that I don't. And this is just not. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of lack of self-worth. I thought I'd created something that I would never be able to achieve.
Yeah.
And I started to run away. I sold my business as quickly as I could. I left the state. I tried. I thought I would leave my marriage. I thought I would leave. If I could have left my kids at that time, I would have. I was just so overwhelmed and scared. And that started for me a personal development journey that made me really stop, because the one thing I couldn't run away from was myself.
That's true.
Yeah. And I was just taking myself with me to each area and not paying attention to myself and looking at what was important to me. And what I realized was I had created an algorithm of success in business and in my life that belonged to someone else. I had followed someone else's steps for advice and for success and for what success looks like. I had created this idea of what success should be based on someone else's idea of what success should be. And it was something that just didn't fit with me. And it was time for me to really step back and ask myself, what does success look like for me? And what's really fascinating, Rob, is I'm sitting here talking to you, and I have the most successful orthodontic practice in Maine,
Yep.
one of the top 1% in the United States in Invisalign. It's an amazing, beautiful, now new practice that I'm so proud of.
Yeah.
I still have those same two handsome young boys and a third child.
Yeah.
I'm married to the same incredible man. Everything looks the same, but everything changed in terms of myself. And when I was able to have real, honest, and open conversations with myself, now I started seeing success happening around me. When I started paying attention to what was critical and important to my version of success, now my business started doing well. My family started doing well. My husband and I had a much stronger and deeper and more authentic relationship.
Yeah.
And now I started to feel like the real me again.
That's awesome. Before we move on to where you are now and all that, one of the things I tell people when I'm coaching them is just be you. I said, don't be someone else, just be you. I said, take all the learnings and then make them you. Looking back now, once you left the practice, before we go into how you are now, were there red flags that you missed along the way? Was there things being poked up? Now, I'm doing this for business people who may be listening or people in life who are feeling overwhelmed. And the reason I'm saying that is I actually do know someone who was driving one night and nearly drove into a tree. And the only reason she didn't was because she had one of her children with her. She got to that stage where everything was just too much. And now she looks back and she said, I didn't, as you said, I didn't see the red flags at the time until it all got too much. If someone's listening to this now and they're going, oh man, I can listen, I can relate to where she's at. I'm feeling the same. What 2 or 3 things would you say you need to look for when you're in that situation?
Oh, such a great question, Rob. I think, looking back on it, when I wasn't taking care of myself, and that sounds like, it sounds almost cliched, this whole idea of self-care. This is the big buzzword here in the States is self-care. And what was happening is I was putting myself as an afterthought. And that sounds like selflessness, in the healthcare
being
profession.
A people pleaser.
Absolutely. And I was pushing myself to the point where I wasn't available anymore. I had run out of myself. We talk about giving to others and how that brings so much happiness, and it does. And that's my profession. I serve all day and I love it. But taking care of the person who is doing the serving is so important. So when I was noticing my body failing, that was a red flag, 100%.
Yeah.
When I was noticing, I should have noticed when I was noticing the relationships that were closest to me in my life. I mentioned my husband, things like that, where relationships were crumbling around me. Those were most certainly red flags. For me, a big red flag was my relationship with my children, because what I found myself doing is exhausting myself all day and really not liking my day at work, not enjoying myself, getting home feeling completely drained and having no room left for my children. So what I was doing in the evenings was trying to escape from all the stress, from all the taking from me. And escape from me at the time looked like into a bottle. I was escaping into alcohol.
I've heard a lot of that. And as much as I do like a drink myself, there's a difference between liking a drink and escaping. And especially in these current times, which we will get onto later in the interview about COVID and how people do it, you don't realize it's quite easy. When I grew up in the liquor industry in Australia, and Dad always said to me, a publican is someone who runs the pubs or the bar. And he said, if you ever meet a publican who's drunk all the time, what that means is his business is failing. Now, this is, we're talking about, I was told that 40 years ago as a very young person now, and that hasn't changed. So if we fast forward now to the practice you have now, What is the biggest difference, and what are the things you do now compared to what you did then?
One of the biggest things is I just take time to connect with myself on a daily basis.
And
That's
how do you do
very,
that?
very important. For me, a game changer was meditation.
Yeah.
So I meditate every single morning. And Rob, I
Awesome.
know the days that I don't. The days that I don't, I
Yes.
feel it. I feel it.
Yes. I'm hearing you. I really am.
Yeah, it made a huge difference. And, not just in terms of relationships, but in terms of me
Mm.
being able to be authentic and have clarity in business decisions as well.
Yes. Gives you focus. I say.
Absolutely. And it
Yeah.
allows you to not make business decisions from a place of fear or anxiety, but rather from a
Yeah.
place of power. I think any time in business when we make a decision out of fear, it is always the wrong one. Now, it doesn't mean that you might not necessarily have chosen or decided to make that exact same decision if you were in a place of power.
Mm.
Maybe the choice was the same, but the action of making it out of fear robs us of our ability to have confidence in our business decisions. I look back at that time in my first practice. The biggest problem was I was losing my self-confidence and my self-worth because I was just making decisions to put out flames, put out fires. And I
Yeah.
was just trying to hold on to what I had instead of from a place of growth and
Yes.
confidence. Yeah.
Wow. So today, but you've gone from what was a failing
Hmm.
practice to an awesome practice with another child, family life's good. And then we hit another speed bump called COVID. Now, a lot of people in business, some people in business are doing very well. Other people are hanging on by nothing. They're just literally hanging on. What would your advice be to people now who are just barely hanging on to their business and their life during this time?
I'm probably going to have an unpopular answer for you here.
No such thing.
COVID was a gift to me.
Hmm.
And that feels very uncomfortable where you guys are sitting right now, because I
Yeah.
remember being in that place
Hmm.
and it was scary. But what happened was it gave me an opportunity to again reevaluate.
Yep.
It gave me the space and the time to reconsider in the business in particular. So I'll talk just
Hmm.
about in terms of business strategy. My business partner and I am a co-owner
Yeah.
of our orthodontic practice. It gave us a heartbeat to have some really great meetings. Number one, what are our values? Let's reassess our values. Let's reassess what the goals are for this practice. Let's reassess what's most important to us in this practice. And we became crystal clear about where we needed to put our attention. And then because of the lockdown, now remember at the time for
Yeah.
us, I couldn't see any patients. So we, for 3 months, had no patient care, not earning $1. So
Yeah.
that's disastrous for a business like
It
ours.
is. Yeah.
So I'm not saying this out of a place of, I was exempt from that fear.
Yeah.
The financial fear was there, but we looked at it as an opportunity to pivot. And I think that when I look at the businesses around me, at least in this part of the States, who really made it through COVID, they looked at it as an opportunity to redefine themselves and find the opportunity in the discomfort.
I love it.
And I had this great conversation with one of my patients who is a car dealer. He owns a car dealership
Hmm.
here in Maine. When we came back out of COVID and could see my patients again, I said, geez, how have you been doing? And I loved his answer. He said to me, I got excited because it felt like I was just the beginning of my career when I was starting something, because I could start thinking outside the box. I was out of that mundane, this is what works,
Hmm.
this is our usual success algorithm. I could start being creative because I
Yes.
had to be.
Yes.
And it's that attitude that will get you there every time, because even if you make mistakes, even if you make a huge business mistake. Now I look back and I think, yeah, I could have done some things differently. I could have done, but I learned from every action that I took, which is such an important one. So there's that very important aspect of business where you can't just sit on the fence in fear and not take action. You have to take action.
You do.
And when you take action, you get the feedback and the learning, and now you can change or make a new decision. So for me, COVID was so exciting because we were taking action every single day in a way that we hadn't even considered. And we created whole new processes and procedures in our practice that we never had before. And they've actually made us much more successful coming out of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. There's been so many people who put their head in the sand and, oh, woe was me and I was that. We've just gone into the second lockdown in Sydney, Australia, and the attitude's different from the first. The business attitude is very different. It was a bit of a novelty the first time. People ran around, and I know people just shut their business. The world was coming to an end. The sky was falling in. This time, business has just gone, yeah, well, okay.
Interesting.
We know what to do. The smart businesses is that, look, we are having businesses folding, and that's because there is nothing they can do.
Exactly.
There's always going to be casualties, and that's very unfortunate. But the good businesses are now taking that and going, well, okay, we did this last time, we'll do it again, and we'll come out of it better again.
But Rob, it's interesting because when you mention those businesses folding, it breaks your heart a little as a business owner because it's somebody's baby, somebody's dream. But I'll tell you from my experience, my business that I did fold, that I did close, was one of the greatest trajectories in my success.
Yeah.
I look back now, and that had to happen. I had to learn those lessons. It was painful. Yes, I had to go to a bankruptcy attorney. I mean, it was bad times. But I look at it, and my greatest growth, Rob, came from those experiences. And I don't think I would have had the aha moments and the insight if I'd not lived through that painful part of success and of business. Yeah.
So one of the other strings to your bow, which you are well known for, is a prosperity coach.
Yes, I love it. It's my passion.
So tell us, what is a prosperity coach?
So what I love to do is speak to business owners, especially in the healthcare professions who have small businesses, who are struggling with inner fulfillment in their business. This idea of having this passion when we're younger often, or sometimes older, and growing a dream, and then what you've just grown and what you've created starts sucking the life out of you. You feel like you've been jumped on this train that you can't get off of.
Yep.
And there's a lot of shame and guilt behind that because it's something you've created. It was your dream. It was my first practice. That was what I asked for. I created that business, and that business was destroying me. Or at least that was the story I was telling myself. Yes. So I love to speak to people and help them change their business, change their lives by redefining what success looks like to them, and not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and giving it all up, but how to take that passion and that dream and turn it into something that's actually feeding them and bringing them so much happiness. And it's my favorite thing to do because although we focus on happiness and finding the fulfillment in every day, what happens as a ripple effect is the business starts doing better and better and better and becomes more successful. So that's why I don't call it a happiness. It really is a prosperity coach, because the prosperity starts happening all around when you start focusing on what happiness means to you and looking for it in every day and not just putting it off until the weekend. I hate this idea. I don't know if you have this term in Australia. Do you guys talk about hump day?
Yeah, some of the radio guys do, but it's
hump day. Yeah. And the idea is that you're over the hump of the week. Like you're getting
Wednesdays.
closer. Yeah. And that to me is so sad as a business owner. I want to value every day. I want to get excited about every day. I don't want to live my life just for the weekends because that's no life at all.
It's more like an employee mindset, not an employer.
Absolutely. Especially when we've created something that is of us.
Yes.
These businesses are a part of us. So I love working with people to try to find that value on a daily, every day. And let me tell you, I get excited for work on a Monday morning. And some people think I'm absolutely fake or not telling the truth about that. But I promise you, it's what I work towards.
Yeah.
It's a goal of mine and it's a practice. There
Yeah.
are days that feel hard. And then I go right back to those tools that I've already developed in my arsenal to redefine for myself what is joy in this day and how am I going to do it? How am I going to find that for me today?
I always say to people that happiness or joy is an attitude, and people love to buy and go to businesses. They're happy.
Yes,
They don't even
that's
look
the
at the
secret.
price.
Absolutely. And people love to work for bosses who are happy.
Oh yes, and I've had a few the other way. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So it's fascinating how just focusing on something that seems so selfish initially, focusing on my happiness is
Mm.
actually what's good for everyone else. Because I'll tell you, even in an industry where I need my patients to take care
Yes.
of their teeth when they go home, when I'm in a good place, they do better.
I'm going to throw something out of left field at you. I've
Go.
noticed that during COVID and during everything, during might be elections, it might be anything, the press take a negative slant on everything.
Yes.
How can I find the negative here? They're not looking for the warm and fuzzy. They're not looking for the good. How does, or what could you suggest to a business person who's consistently hearing from the press, negative, 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 doesn't matter what it is. How do they compartmentalize that so it doesn't affect them and they can keep on their course of being happy within themselves, happy within their business and being successful?
Here's another unpopular answer.
That's cool. I love them.
Turn it off.
Yeah.
Turn it off. There's a point where the negativity seeps into your understanding of truth.
That's
So
true.
there's a popular saying here. Oh, what is it? Toxic positivity.
Well, okay.
Okay, but that's a buzzword here. It's almost like culturally we start to tell ourselves that positivity is not realistic. Positivity is naive.
Yeah.
Having an attitude of positivity and optimism is naive.
Hmm.
And nothing can be further from the truth when it comes to business. And I love talking about this from a framework of business because
Yes.
it's that optimism that keeps you creative in your business solutions. It has to be optimism. If you're constantly being pessimistic and negative, then you're going to drive yourself in that direction. I love this analogy of
Yeah.
when you're driving and you're learning to drive, you
Hmm.
keep your eyes on where you're going. You're not putting your eyes, you were talking about that client of yours who
Yeah.
was avoiding driving into a tree. If I'm facing that tree, I'm going to end up in the tree.
You
I
will.
have to keep my eyes on the road where I'm going. Otherwise, I'm going to turn this ship towards the negative side. And that's true in business. If we're constantly focusing on the negative. Now, I'm definitely not saying to ignore problems that are coming up or to, you know, push things down or
Yeah.
ignore problems. If there's a client of yours or there's a team member of yours that's causing problems, you have to focus in
Yeah.
it and you have to address it in the moment. But always addressing it with a framework of how can this be better? How can I help you here? How can we make this work? And if the answer is we have to let you go, okay, we have to let
Yeah.
this person go and keep moving forward into the positive direction. But I think that when you let too much of cultural influence of that negative train, misery loves company.
Oh, yes.
Everybody will jump on it. And now it becomes the popular thing to talk about. Let's all talk about the problems, but nobody's talking about the solutions.
No.
And the people who make the greatest change in society and in business are the ones who are focusing on the solutions. And they actually get excited when problems come about. It's that same attitude I was
Yes.
talking about
Yes.
during COVID. We got excited. How can we use this now? I used it to start a podcast.
Yeah.
I used that. I was wanting to do it for so many years. And when was forced not to treat patients, I thought, now's the time. Let's go. I can start my own podcast, looking for the opportunity in the moment instead of focusing constantly on the negative side of things.
So what do you think, if you look back now, what was your biggest challenge to get you to where you are?
Self-confidence,
And was that
self-worth.
something that was put into you at school? You were told you were not good enough, or that you didn't have the people around you that gave you the confidence?
You know, when I came at that tender age, and I think that's
Yeah.
probably, I just realized that that's probably why I love treating patients of this age. But when I came to America in that tender age from South Africa, there was a lot of culture shock. In the 80s, there wasn't this internet availability and the world seemed much larger and foreign.
Yes.
So America was a completely different place. And being from South Africa was very unusual to the
Yes.
people who
It would have
the
been,
children.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, completely. And I think also people never imagined that there might be a white person living in Africa, from Africa. Yeah, the whole thing was
Yeah.
just very unusual to lots of people. And I think I started to mistrust myself because I didn't understand culturally what I needed to do to fit in, to be accepted. And that beginning of my life where I wasn't trusting myself and I started trusting other people. And that's where that whole idea of defining success based on someone else's idea of what success looks like. I didn't trust myself to make those
I
decisions.
think we've all been guilty of that growing up,
Mm.
looking at other people going, well, if he's happy, he's got money, he's got all the girls, or she's got all the guys, they've got the nice car, that must be success. So that's what I'll copy.
Exactly.
Rather than looking at what they did to get to there.
Absolutely. Or what that lifestyle looks like. You know, that's what I found. I finally had the fancy house, the fancy dogs, the fancy kids, the fancy husband, the fancy cars, but I was miserable.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't for me what success needed to look like. And I think that that's the same in business as well, even specifically when you were speaking about during COVID, when you're constantly looking. I think it's great to get ideas. Mentors are so critical in business.
Yes,
You
they
know,
are.
reading. I'm an avid reader myself. I devour books. I want to learn from as many people as I possibly can. But what the secret always is how does that how can I take those lessons and interpret it from my understanding and
Yeah.
in my life and in my business? Because even though I can get suggestions and advice from so many people, only I know what's right for me, and only I know what's right for my business. And having that confidence again allows you to make those really confident decisions. Definitely taking the advice, learning from people, and then finding things that do work for you. Oh, that works really well. But, you know, especially when it comes to, you were talking about sales earlier, so important to get so much advice from different people in terms of how sales works for them. But it's always going to come down to your own flavor and what works for you and your own verbiage and your own coloring of what sales, and bringing a service to somebody who needs your work, bringing those two things together.
So if you look at now where we've been, and it's been a rough 2 or 3 years for everyone around the world, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for business from your side of what you coach and where you see for the next 3 or 4 years?
Well, what we're living in right now is, in terms of the biggest challenge in business, is staffing, personnel.
Yes. Same here,
And
same in Australia.
yeah, that's our biggest challenge right now, is just getting support. Especially if you've grown your business to really, as great leaders should, to be dependent on delegation and support from a team. That, I think, is our biggest challenge.
Awesome. Now, you spoke about you like to read, you like to have mentors, you like to talk to people.
Yes.
So if I manage to get you a lovely restaurant in Maine with about 3 or 4 seats, who would you invite and why?
Oh, what a great question. Ah, That's a really great question.
And they can be alive or dead. They can be famous, infamous. Doesn't matter.
Well, the women who I look up to most is Maya Angelou.
Yes.
I would definitely love to meet her and ask her all the questions of how she found success and happiness in her life, and just all the struggles that she went through, and her ability to still tap into that beautiful creative side of her
Yeah.
throughout her life, but also how she found the courage to be her true authentic self. So definitely it would be Maya Angelou. I think I would invite definitely Nelson Mandela.
That'd be an interesting one.
Yes, that would be phenomenal to have Nelson Mandela there. And then I think my third one would be probably my brother.
Your brother? Okay. Oh, I don't normally have those ones. Why your brother?
My brother passed in 2016.
Yeah.
And my brother actually took his life in 2016. Yeah. And what I would love to know and understand is what his understanding was, or what his fears were, just to understand the human design a little bit better. I think that so many of us struggle with sadness and depression.
Yes. Yep.
And we don't pay attention to it and give it, you're talking about the red flags.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention to those red flags along the way. And I would love to understand that more so that I could help more people.
Awesome. So anyone listening to our podcast today, how do they find Tarryn? Where are you on the big World Wide Web? Or if they want to catch up on your podcast, how do they get in touch with you?
Thank you for asking. It's at thebizofhappiness.com. You're welcome to join me anytime. And I'd love it if your listeners would listen to one of the episodes on the Business of Happiness podcast that's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and on YouTube.
Yep.
And Instagram and Facebook, The Business of Happiness.
Awesome. Well, look, you know what? It's been a pleasure. It really has been a lot of fun talking to you today. It's great to talk to a fellow podcaster. I know that sounds a little bit selfish, but it really is, especially someone who's in business, who's done the hard yards and is using her knowledge to actually help other people. I hope you have a great, I think you're coming into your winter now over there. That'd be right?
Yeah, just hitting the fall. One of the most beautiful times of the year here.
We call that autumn here. We're about to, we've hit spring.
Yes.
So it's, we're starting to warm up finally. So
that's wonderful.
It's going to be awesome. So thank you so much. And we will catch you again. And as I say to everyone at the end of our podcast, have a groovy day.